Hello, today we're going to talk about not framing, but actually stretching canvas. And I want to show you the tools I use and objects that I also use in order to get it done. First off, I would have to say measuring tape, make sure you know the pieces that you're going to be using, how long they got to be, the size of the final picture that you're going to be creating, you got to know. Secondarily is a staple gun. I happen to use a heavy-duty carpenter style that might be used for putting up insulation. The type of staples are 8mm, 5/16 of an inch. Next is a stretcher tool, which is basically a pliers, but it's wide and it has a fulcrum capability. In a pinch, you can also use old school pliers, either channel locks or the smaller handheld pliers. I always use a tack hammer to drive in staples that don't go in all the way, plus a square. Now, the square is made or used because we have to join these pre-made stretchers together. We can force them together as they should go, but then I always like to check for square and make sure that it went in correctly so that I have a square piece at the end. So let's pretend that I've put it all together. What I end up with is this, and this happens to be a 16 by 20, and I'm using Frederick's brand. If you're going to buy stretchers, make sure you buy the same brand for both long and short end. If you have two different manufacturers, oftentimes they have two different cutting tools that they use to make their corners, and you end up in a pinch. So we have our piece. What we need is canvas. I have a piece of canvas cut out over here, and I'm going to set that down on my table. And I like to have a few inches overhang on every side, so just going to eyeball how it sits. I grab a razor blade behind the camera, and just with a very sharp razor blade I cut the canvas out. And there we have our roughed canvas size. Now, I start in the middle, and I pull it just finger tight. Grab my staple gun, throw in one. Go to the other side, throw in one. There's a single staple. Single staple on the other side. This one's not seated all the way, so I take my little tack hammer and boom, it's now seated. Perpendicular. Finger tight. I'm not using any tools for tightness at this point. I used to really honk down on these canvases that I stretch. I would really pull hard with the pliers, and I found that it created a lot of torque and created a twist in my canvases over time. So I've stopped really wailing on it, and I just generally use slight tug. You notice the tool goes up, with the fulcrum side down, and I just put a little bit of weight on it. Pull it tight, and I'll put in 1, 2. These are roughly spaced inch to 1.5 inches apart. Go to the other side of it, just a little gentle pull, not too tight. stapling halfway the thickness or further away from the canvas painting surface. Now I go to the opposite side. This is the long side again, and I'm just grabbing, pulling. 1, 2. Other side of that center staple. 1, 2. So basically 5 on both sides now. 5 and 5. It's not quite tight. A little bit of play in it. Now I go to the short ends. We have 1 and 1. On this one side, we just grab, pull, hold. 1, 2. Other side of that staple. 1, 2. I proceed from there. Okay, got all sides stapled. And you see it's fairly tight. And it's just from giving it a little bit of tension as I pull. And we can end up with what is probably the most confusing for folks, but it's very easy to do. Oops, sorry about that. It's part of my props for later. You have to fold the corners. So basically I pinch and fold. I don't know if you see that. Just a pinch at 45 degrees angles. And I fold it back on itself. You may not catch in the light, but fold it back creates a 45-degree angle here. And I take my stapler and just one is fine. Next one, pinch, 45 degrees, and I lay it back on itself the opposite way so it's like a book match. So this one folded that way, this one's folding this way. One staple's enough. Pinch. Now remember our other side was on the long side, so last one. Pinch. This is a little sloppy here on this one. Hold on, give me a second. Now, generally speaking, you don't have to worry too much about the back, but I try to keep it fairly tight. And I put a staple in on the overlap pieces. And this is actually for future generations, so they got something to work with it when they have to re-stretch it. So that's it. It's ready for gesso. That's one. This is the pre-made type of stretcher. They come in all different lengths. These happen to be 16, but I think this is roughly 40 inches long. You can make huge canvases. And they get heavy duty too. These happen to be standard duty and light duty. Or you can make your own. This happens to be stretcher that I made out of a 2x4. Basically a 2x4 that was ripped, and then I just cut an L out of it with my table saw and my chop saw. They're off camera, I believe, but if you have those kind of tools, you can make your own. And here's a larger one where I've actually put in reinforcing corners out of plywood, mainly because it was a larger span. And I like to do gallery rolls, which means a thicker edge. Here's a piece in the back here. This is a painting that I'm working on right now. I have it sketched in, but you can see the back. Reinforced corners and how I'm doing the gallery wrap all the way around. It's fully painted gesso white as it goes around, and then on the surface in front it's just blue gesso right now. Okay, we now have our stretched canvas, and what we're going to have to do now is gesso. I use either white gesso, which you can buy at any art supply store. There's transparent gesso, which I use over drawings. Comes in different size containers. This happens to be a little jar style. And I often use pigment in with my gesso. I apply it with a brush or a large spackle knife. And move the transparent off to the side. I'm not using that today. And it's as simple as just popping the lid and gooing out a pile of it. Now this is where I use my knife. I just kind of spread it even. The reason I use the knife also is it's very quick cover. I used to really like to work on a super smooth surface, and the knife is perfect for getting a smooth surface very quickly. A broader knife, such as the large plasterer's knives, which can be 16 inches wide, and you can pretty much cover an entire canvas and just with one pull, make it super smooth. However, today I'm going to be working with a brush after I've spread it, and my next step is, once I get the first top surface done, I start in with the sides. And the reason I'm doing the sides is, even though I'm not painting here necessarily, I do want to anchor the canvas around the staples. And once this gesso is dried, it's like, in a sense, glue. The canvas becomes impregnated with it. It's a acrylic latex, and it creates a plastic film, and that plastic film will act as a glue around the canvas and the staple. So it's not just a mechanical joint, in a sense. A mechanical joint meaning friction. It's not just friction at that point. The gesso becomes a solid and acts as a glue. So I'm pulling gesso from the surface right now. I'm pulling the extra that I have on the surface, and I'm just laying it over the edge. Working down the sides, working down the sides. Shouldn't take you more than 15 minutes to stretch and gesso a canvas. It's not that much time out of your day, and especially when you're dealing with odd size canvases. You may have a frame that you bought at a thrift shop that you can't find a pre-stretched canvas for. Well, you just find the stretcher sizes that you need and then stretch your own. Very simple. Alright, now got all the sides done. I'm going to do perpendicular strokes, very light at this point. I'm just barely touching the surface. Use your brush tip to pick out any inconsistencies. Alright, this is ready. I have a commission that I'm working on Thursday, and I have to have this particular canvas ready to go by then. So I don't know if you can catch the light, but that's very, very smooth, ready for paint. I have to let this dry. Generally, I would say give it 24 hours. You could probably paint on it in 8, but that's basically saying that the surface is dry. You want it to leach out. As you can see, these on the back, the canvas perforations have allowed gesso to come through and actually anchor. It bulges out, and basically is creating a mechanical bond at that point too. So I'm going to set this aside and let it dry.